A man visited the cemetery to place flowers on his beloved mother's grave. After spending a quiet moment of remembrance, he turned to head back to his car. On his way, he noticed another man kneeling by a grave a short distance away. The man was visibly distraught, his voice trembling as he repeated over and over, "Why did you have to die? Why did you have to die?" Intrigued and moved by such an intense display of grief, the first man hesitated, then cautiously approached. "Excuse me, sir," he said gently. "I don't mean to intrude on your sorrow, but I've never seen such anguish before. May I ask, are you mourning a child, a parent, or someone else very dear to you?" The kneeling man paused, wiping his tears, and took a deep breath before answering, "My wife's first husband." A man goes to doctor complaining about migraines. His doctor tells him, "I also suffer from the same ailment. Every time I get one, I give my dear wife oral. When she has an orgasm, she tightens her legs around my head, which gets rid of the pain. You should also try it." 2 weeks later, the patient tells doctor, "Your suggestion worked, and I'd like to tell you that you have a very nice house." An elderly lawyer, knowing his time was near, came up with a plan. He told his wife, "When I die, put all my money in the attic. That way I can grab it on my way up to heaven." A few weeks after he passed, his wife was cleaning the attic and noticed the bags of money were still there. Shaking her head, she laughed and said, "That old fool! I told him we should have put it in the basement." A farmer hires a new hand. He looks a little slow but strong as an ox. He tells him, "Toss these hay bales in the tractor." And he does. No problem. He tells him, "Put these fence posts into the dirt." And he mallets them in faster than the farmer ever had. He then trusted the young man enough to take care of the toughest task on the farm. "Hold down the cow and insert this suppository. It's for mad cow disease." And hands him a pill the size of a Red Bull can. 10 minutes later, looking worn out and wobbly on his feet, the farmhand returns. "Ha, ha, oh, did old Bess put up a fight?" asked the farmer with a grin. "No, the young man said concernedly. "She just stared at me like I was crazy, but that pill hurt like the dickens." Jack walked into a sports bar around 9:58 p.m. and sat next to a blonde just as the 10 o'clock news came on. A man was on a ledge of a tall building about to jump. The blonde asked, "Do you think he'll jump?" Jack said, "I bet he will." She said, "I bet he won't." They each put $30 on the bar. Sure enough, the man swan-dived off the building to his death. Upset, she handed Jack her $30, saying, "Fair's fair." Jack replied, "I can't take your money. I saw this earlier on the 5 o'clock news." The blonde said, "So did I. But I didn't think he'd do it again." A man steps onto his porch and sees a gorilla in his front yard tree. He calls animal control, and an hour later, a guy shows up with a ladder, a pit bull, and a shotgun. "I'm here for the gorilla," the man says. "Here's how this works. I climb the ladder, shake the branch, the gorilla falls. The pit bull is trained to grab him by the balls until he's calm, then I can cage him." The homeowner says, "Makes sense." "I get the ladder and the dog, but what's the shotgun for?" The man replies, "That's for you, in case I fall out of the tree instead of the gorilla." A man walks into a bar and orders a beer. The bartender charges him 15 cents. Confused, but not complaining, the man pays. After a while, he decides to have another beer and some food, so he orders another beer and a steak. The bartender charges him 50 cents, 15 for the beer and 35 for the food. After finishing his food and drink, he calls the bartender over and says, "Mate, that was the best steak I've ever had." "I want to talk to the manager and thank him." "No problem," says the bartender. "He's upstairs with my wife." "What's he doing upstairs with your wife?" asks the man. "Probably the same thing I'm doing to his business." My wife and I were sitting at a table at my high school reunion, and I kept staring at a drunken lady swigging her drink as she sat alone at a nearby table. My wife asked, "Do you know her?" "Yes," I sighed. "She's my old girlfriend. I understand she took to drinking right after we split up those many years ago, and I hear she hasn't been sober since." "My God," says my wife. "Who would think a person could go on celebrating that long?" Booba and Billy Bob weren't the brightest fellas in Little Rock. One day at Walmart, they decided to buy into the weekly charity raffle, 5 tickets each. The next week, Billy Bob wins first prize, a year's supply of gourmet spaghetti sauce and extra long spaghetti. Bubba wins 6th prize, a toilet brush. A week later, they run into each other at Walmart. Billy Bob says, "Man, I love my prize. That spaghetti is great." Bubba frowns and says, "Yeah, I think I'm going to go back to using toilet paper." By nature, Jason was very intelligent, but a bit shy. One day he went into a bar and he saw a stunningly attractive woman sitting alone at a table drinking a white wine spritzer. Jason couldn't take his eyes off this lady, and eventually he gathered up the courage to walk across and speak to her. "Hello, I'm Jason. Would you mind if I sat with you and chatted for a while?" asked Jason quietly but politely. The woman responded by yelling at the top of her voice, "No! I will not sleep with you tonight." Jason blushed, beetroot red with embarrassment, and everyone in the bar looked over to see what was going on. So he walked back over to the counter where he'd been sitting, reflecting on how he might have handled the situation and intending to leave the bar as soon as he'd finished his drink. However, a couple of minutes later, the attractive woman walked over to him and apologized. "I'm really sorry," she said. "I'm actually a PhD student at Harvard, and I'm researching how people respond in embarrassing situations." To which Jason responded, yelling loudly at the top of his voice, "What do you mean you charge $300 minimum?" A flying saucer landed at a gas station on a lonely country road. The 2 space aliens inside seemed completely unconcerned about detection. In fact, the letters UFO emblazoned in big, bold letters on one side of their shiny craft. As the station owner stood and gawked in silence, paralyzed with shock, his young attendant nonchalantly filled up the tank and waved to the 2 aliens as they took off. "Do you realize what just happened?" the station owner finally uttered. "Yeah," said attendant. "So, didn't you see the space aliens in that vehicle?" "Yeah," repeated the attendant. "So, didn't you see the letters UFO on the side of that vehicle?" "Yeah," repeated the attendant. "So, don't you know what UFO means?" The attendant rolled his eyes. "Good grief, boss! I've been working here for 6 years. Of course I know what UFO means. Was unleaded fuel only." Prisoner has his first night in prison. The lights go out. Someone shouts out 65. There is some laughing. Someone else. 27 factorial, a bit more laughing and giggling. The new inmate says to his cellmate, "What's this about?" "Well," he says, "we have been here so long we gave numbers to our jokes. It saves time. Go on, have a try." So the new guy shouts out 147. Well, the place goes mad. They are screaming and choking with laughter, banging their cell doors. It finally calms down. "What did I do?" he asks his cellmate. Well, they haven't heard that one before. A man was passing by a mental asylum and was curious because all the patients in the courtyard were shouting, 14, 14, 14. Now, there was a huge wall that divided the public from the patients, so the man couldn't see what was going on. Because of his curiosity, he naturally wanted to see what was happening. He managed to find a peeping hole to look through. As soon as he looked through the hole, the man was promptly poked in the eye by a stick. That's when all the patients started shouting, 15, 15, 15! An elderly couple was enjoying breakfast on a peaceful morning when the wife suddenly asked, "Are you going to remarry after I'm gone?" The husband looked up, startled. "What kind of question is that? We're having a lovely morning and you bring up something so depressing." But the thought seemed to linger with her. That night, she asked again, and the next day, and the day after that. Finally, after days of pestering, he sighed and said, "Fine. Yes, I'll remarry. Are you happy now?" She wasn't done yet. "Will you sell the house?" "No, of course not." "Will you sell our bed?" "Why would I do that?" "Absolutely not. Will you let her use my golf clubs?" He paused for a moment, then replied, "No, I don't think so. She's left-handed." Little Johnny's sales tactic stuns the class and teacher with a jaw-dropping $2,467. Profit. When Monday morning rolled around, the classroom buzzed with excitement as students eagerly shared their weekend sales stories. The assignment was simple yet challenging. Sell something over the weekend and deliver a presentation on effective salesmanship. Little Sally kicked things off with confidence. "I sold Girl Scout cookies and made $30, she shared proudly. "My approach was to appeal to people's sense of community spirit, which I believe led to my success." The teacher smiled and nodded. "Very good, Sally." Next up was little Jenny. "I sold magazines," she said, beaming. "I made $45 by explaining how magazines keep people informed about current events." "Excellent work, Jenny," said the teacher, clearly impressed. Finally, it was little Johnny's turn. Known for his unpredictability, he strolled to the front of the room and emptied a box filled to the brim with cash onto the teacher's desk. "I made $2,467, Johnny declared with a grin. The teacher gasped. $2,467? What in the world were you selling?" "Toothbrushes," Johnny replied nonchalantly. "Toothbrushes?" echoed the teacher in disbelief. "How could you sell that many toothbrushes?" Johnny leaned in, ready to explain. "I found the busiest corner in town and set up a dip and chip stand. I offered everyone a free sample. As soon as they tried it, they all said the same thing. This tastes like dog crap." The classroom erupted in laughter, but Johnny wasn't done. "Then I'd say, it is dog crap. Want to buy a toothbrush?" And they did, every single time. Stunned but curious, the teacher asked, "Where did you get the idea for this strategy?" Johnny grinned wider. "I just followed the government's approach. Give people something crappy for free and make them pay to fix the problem." The room exploded in laughter, and even the teacher couldn't help but crack a smile. Why Johnny's strategy? Worked. Johnny's unconventional sales tactic teaches a surprising lesson in problem-solving and innovation. By creating an immediate need for his product, he tapped into basic human psychology, offering a solution to an urgent problem. While unorthodox and a bit messy, Johnny's story demonstrates the importance of thinking outside the box in sales and marketing. It's a playful reminder that sometimes humor and ingenuity can turn an ordinary task into extraordinary success. A man opened a new restaurant but couldn't decide on a name. He decided he'd name it after the third person who walked in. The third customer came in and he asked her name. She said Jill. He replied, "Well, Jill, you have great legs," and decided to name the place Jill's Legs. A week later, a man was sitting outside on the sidewalk. A police officer asked, "What are you doing?" He said, "Waiting for Jill's legs to open so I can get something to eat." Jack, Eddie, and Carl, 3 writers attending a convention, booked a 3-bedroom suite on the 75th floor of a hotel. When they returned, the receptionist said, "Sorry, all elevators are broken. You'll have to take the stairs." To make the climb less boring, they divided the floors. Jack, funny stories, would entertain from floors 1 to 25. Eddie, scary stories from floors 26 to 50. Carl, sad stories, from floors 51 to 75. Jack's jokes had Eddie and Carl laughing hysterically by floor 25. Eddie's scary tales had Jack and Carl hugging each other by floor 50. Then Carl began his sad stories. "Here's my saddest one," he said nervously. "There once was a man named Carl who left the hotel room key in the car." An elderly man walks into a logging company, eager to apply for a job as a woodcutter. The boss looked him over skeptically and said, "I'm not sure you're fit enough for the job." The old man smiled confidently. "I can fell any tree with a single swing of my axe." Intrigued, the boss decided to let him prove it. They went outside, and the old man approached a 5-foot tree. With one powerful swing, it crashed to the ground. Impressed, but not fully convinced, the boss pointed to a 10-foot tree. Again, the old man swung once, and the tree fell effortlessly. Next, a 30-foot tree came down with the same single strike. Finally, the boss gestured toward a towering 80-foot redwood. The old man approached, took aim, and with one mighty swing, the massive tree tumbled. Stunned, the boss asked, "Where on earth did you learn to do that?" The old man wiped his brow and replied, "I honed my skills in the Sahara Forest." "The Sahara Forest? Don't you mean the Sahara Desert?" the boss asked, confused. The old man grinned. "Well, that's what they call it now." A man walked into a quaint little cake shop run by an elderly couple and asked for a cup of coffee. The old man behind the counter turned to the kitchen and called out, "Sweetie, a cup of coffee for this gentleman, please." The man found it endearing, and since he was feeling a bit indulgent, he decided to order a slice of cake, too. The elderly man called out again, this time with more affection, "Love of my life." "A slice of cake, too, please." The man smiled, amused by the couple's sweet exchange, and thought he'd push his luck a little further. He added a request for some cookies. The old man turned to the kitchen one last time and said with all the love in his voice, "Oh, reason of my existence." "Some cookies, too." After enjoying his treats, the man paid his bill and turned to the elderly man, still smiling. "I have to say, it's so adorable how you and your wife call each other those cute nicknames. You don't see that much anymore." The old man looked at the young man, then toward the kitchen, and whispered, "Nah, I just forgot her name 20 years ago." A maid approaches the lady of the house and asks for a raise. "Why on earth do you think you deserve that?" the lady asks, raising an eyebrow. "Well," says the maid, "your husband says I cook better than you ever did." The lady scowls. "Oh, does he now?" But that's still not enough. "Why else do you think you deserve a raise?" The maid continues, "He also says I clean better than you ever did." The lady, now clearly irritated, replies, "I'll be having a word with him later, but that still doesn't justify a raise." The maid hesitates for a moment, then adds, "And I'm better in bed than you, too." The lady's eyes widen in shock. "What?" she screams. "How dare you say that? Did my husband tell you that?" "No," says the maid casually. "It was the gardener." "And now I think we can settle on double my rate." An elderly woman rode into town and tied her mule outside the saloon. She was brushing the trail dust off her clothes when a cocky young cowboy swaggered out, swaying a bit from whiskey, a revolver spinning in his hand. He smirked. "Hey, Granny, ever done a little dancing?" She answered evenly, "No, can't say I have." The cowboy grinned. "Well, today's your lucky day." He started firing shots at the ground near her boots, and she hopped around to avoid getting her toes blown off. The onlookers roared with laughter. When his last shot rang out, the cowboy spun his gun back into the holster and strutted away. The woman quietly walked to her mule, reached into a saddlebag, and pulled out a double-barreled shotgun. Click, click. The sound froze the whole street. The cowboy stopped cold and turned slowly. In a steady voice, she asked, "Son, you ever kissed a mule's backside?" He gulped. "No, ma'am, but I reckon today's my lucky day, too." Jennifer's wedding was fast approaching, and her mom had found the perfect mother-of-the-bride dress. Then disaster struck. Jennifer learned her dad's much younger new wife had bought the exact same dress. Jennifer begged her to exchange it. The stepmom refused. "Absolutely not. I look like $1 million in this dress, and I'm wearing it." When Jennifer told her mom, she just smiled. "Never mind, sweetheart. I'll get another dress. It's your special day." A few days later, they found an even more beautiful gown. Over lunch, Jennifer asked, "Aren't you going to return the first dress?" "When will you ever wear it?" Her mom grinned. "Oh, I'll wear it. To the rehearsal dinner the night before the wedding." A couple was playing golf at a super-exclusive course surrounded by million-dollar homes. At the third tee, the husband warned, "Honey, be careful with your drive. Don't break any windows. Fixing them will cost a fortune." Well, she teed up and shanked the ball right through the biggest house's window. The husband groaned. "I told you." "Let's go apologize and find out the damage." They knocked on the door, and a man invited them in. The place was a mess. Broken glass everywhere, a tipped-over bottle in the foyer. The man said, "Are you the ones who broke my window?" "Yes. Sorry about that," the husband replied. "No, thank you," said the man. "I'm a genie trapped in that bottle for 1,000 years. You freed me, so I'll grant each of you one wish, and I get the last one." The husband said, "I want $1 million a year for life." "Done." The genie turned to the wife. "Your wish?" "A house in every country in the world." "Consider it done." Then the genie asked, "And my wish?" The husband looked at his wife and shrugged. "Well, we got money and houses." "I guess it's okay." The genie took the wife upstairs and spent 2 hours with her. Afterward, he turned to her and said, "How old is your husband, anyway?" 35. "And he still believes in genies? That's amazing."